Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of Breaking Glass from Compass Datacenters. I have with me today Heather Dooley, who is the chair of I Am Women for iMasons. I'm Nancy Novak, Chief Innovation Officer for Compass Datacenters. Heather, it's so great to have you with us.
Thank you, Nancy. It's always wonderful to have a chance to chat with you, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, we have a lot to unpack here, and Heather and I have known each other for quite some time. Heather is a former executive, both Microsoft and Google, and now we work together with iMasons on the I Am Women Committee. And I tell you, we have a lot of complicated and many layers of things that we want to talk about related to diversity and gender parity. To start us out, one of the most complicated issues that we're having with gender parity in our business and in all businesses right now is the setback that women have experienced due to COVID-19. And I'd love to unpack this a little bit, Heather, and kind of, be able to tell the audience some of the things that we're seeing. So if you wouldn't mind, hitting that topic first, that'd be great.
Thanks, Nancy. Yeah, it is actually quite devastating. We've been on a campaign to increase gender parity across technology. And in fact, what we've seen during the pandemic is that 2.4 million women have dropped out of the workforce during the first 12 months of the pandemic. That represents over $800 billion worth of lost income. In addition, a CNBC report recently came out and said that an additional 38% of women surveyed in tech plan to leave their jobs in the next 2 years. And so all of the progress that we've been making in building up the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and building gender parity into our workforce seems to be moving backwards instead of forwards.
Yeah, it just breaks my heart to hear these statistics. They're absolutely shocking. I really feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding about the whys behind that. So the progress that we were making, the trajectory that now has reversed is something that we really need to address. And I feel like understanding some of the whys might help us do that.
Yep. In similar reports, what we're seeing is that women are overwhelmingly looking for increased flexibility, that, career opportunities and progression is one of the most important things that women look for when thinking about their careers and the jobs that they go to. In addition to that, women have had a disproportionate amount of housework and childcare throughout the pandemic compared to men, and it's driving burnout. And so what we see is that more women are, in positions where they're having to make extremely difficult choices between their career and about their responsibilities at home. You can even extend that into the workforce, where you see women who often take on more of the well-being programs. They're shouldering the advancement of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which means, basically their workloads, if they decide to stay in their career, just continues to go up and up. I think pay equity is another area that really needs to have further focus. The Nat Geo October edition came out with an incredible report around pay equity across different intersections of women and race. And pay equity, for example, it'll take until 2055 at the current trajectory for our trajectory. It'll take until 2055 at the current trajectory for white women to experience pay equity. For Black women, that's 112 years. And even worse for Latinas, it's 199 years, according to the Nat Geo report, where essentially women would experience pay equity.
Wow. I've seen a lot of those numbers too. And it still boggles the mind, because every time I feel like we're kind of on that trajectory that's going to stay steady state, it feels like we get a hiccup. And this is like not just a hiccup, but a major hurdle that we're having to get over. And it is interesting to me, when we look at systemically the care providing, portion of people's lives that falls on the shoulders of women particularly, and where the careers are, decided upon based on, who takes the debt of the child care, right? So which salary gets hit with that versus, gets to continue to grow in their careers. And I think a lot of it, Heather, I don't know if how much everybody agrees with this, but a lot of it, in my opinion, is it's a personal choice based on, or it should be. I would love for it to be a personal choice based on, what, not just women want, but what couples want. And I feel like systemically, there's so much built in to our system that doesn't allow that choice to be made when it comes to that equity over caring, for children or parents or, just care providers in general. So I really think that's important. I think it's good for us to understand that, because those are the areas that we should be able to tackle. Now, along these same lines, we are very interested in women in STEM, clearly, right? So, the fact that women are more likely to enroll in STEM courses, I think, is another fascinating thing for us to think about, because it feels to me like we've been filling the pipeline in the academic areas, but maybe, we have a lot to work on when it comes to filling that pipeline within our industry and then advancing those women within our industry as well, because it seems to me like we could maybe make some of those decisions or those changes in our businesses at the top level if we can get that advancement, ticked off when it comes to gender. So how do you feel like, what are some of the ideas around that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I want to go back to something that you just mentioned, and that's really the opportunity for us to continue to enhance women in STEM degrees. The Coursera enrollments, as you mentioned, have gone up significantly in the last 2 years, which is fantastic for entry-level professional certificates. But another side of that story is that, according to Harvard Business Review, only 18% of the certificates that are offered through career and tech education were actually sought by employers. So what you see is this increase in women interested in advancing their opportunity by taking some of these entry-level professional certifications. And I think that that's fantastic. But if there's a misalignment on what employers are actually seeking, and only 18% of the certificates offered, right, are things that are actually sought by employers, then we have a gap that's starting way at the front end of the funnel, if you will, right? We talk about pipeline talent as a total pipeline, and the funnel part is incredibly important, bring new talent into the industry, but also making sure people stay in the industry as well.
Sure. I mean, I'm wondering if that misalignment has anything to do with like the decision makers at the top levels, or maybe policymakers. I'm not sure, but again,
I think it's the systemic piece that you've mentioned, right? Yeah. That, you have to look at all of the decision crossroads in hiring, in retention, in promotion, right? All of those need to be evaluated. And, we're just running around with statistics right now, but just that one is quite startling to me, right? That it means that, when we think about pipeline development in education, we might be misaligned when it comes to the expectations of employers and these, certifications that are being promoted throughout the industry.
Yeah, the other thing that's interesting is the certifications also lend to the credential part, right? So, and women like to be heavily credentialed, and I think there is some of that systemic behavior as well on seeing potential, whether it's with skill sets that are more attribute based versus checking a box with a certain certificate. I think that's very fascinating. Hey, I have a great question for you, Heather. So I know you've seen some trends on startup companies, right? And kind of like, and there's one kind of anomaly in this whole trend where we're looking at them following similar patterns when it comes to representation of women on boards and things like that. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that.
Yep. Thank you. I think that let's go back to a fundamental when it comes to developing opportunities for women. And one of those is role models. And you need to have role models across each of the leadership through management, through first line workers across an organization. And, there's very few women in senior leadership roles. So if you're thinking about coming into a career in an industry, you're looking to evaluate that opportunity or that employer just as much as that employer is looking to evaluate you. But you're a woman, you might be earlier in your career, or maybe you're even thinking about a career change. And as you evaluate those companies and you look for the role models, someone that looks like you, and there's no one there to identify with, you don't really see yourself in those careers. When we think about boards and senior leadership roles, there has been some progress. At the state level, it's really where, from a policy standpoint, there's the most progression. The state of California has required that I think it's 2 board roles for every publicly traded company in the state of California. They must have people who are more representative of the population. And so essentially you're looking for women, looking for people of color, looking for representation at those board levels. But that happens state by state. One of the other areas that I think is really important to kind of unpack is, when we think about private equity and we think about where all of these billions of dollars of transactions are happening in our industry. We had what I call the $25 billion Monday a few weeks ago. And, if private equity firms and companies who are considering mergers and acquisitions put more of an emphasis on the importance of diversity into the strategy, you could actually see companies reacting and being held a little bit more accountable to ensuring that people in leadership are, again, more representative of the population that they're serving.
It's amazing to me the business case around, having gender parity at any level, board levels, management level. It's a huge business case. The economic value of having that, providing the opportunity to all is just absolutely huge. I really wanted to get into a little bit of what your work is accomplishing and what your goals are with Infrastructure Masons and the IM Women as chair of the IM Women group. I know I work with you closely on that, and so obviously I'm very familiar with some of the things that we're doing. But I would love for you to expound on that for our audience a little bit.
You bet. So, Nancy, when we took on our roles within Infrastructure Masons, we really looked for an opportunity to set a target and to put something in place where it was aspirational. And what we determined was, at the very least, let's strive for gender parity. And so the challenge that we've taken in the industry is to have gender parity in our industry by 2025. Now, when you think about the Uptime Institute's report, which was in 2020, only 75% of the participating firms reported that they had, maybe 20% of women representing design, build, or operations. And then a staggering 25% had absolutely no women in their organization. And so the opportunity is huge, right? And this is pre-pandemic. And so despite the numerous studies on the importance of gender diversity, to the point that you just made on financial returns and innovation and better working cultures, this particular industry has a lot of, I'll say, opportunity to increase gender parity. And so what we've done over the last years, we've really looked at the intersection of gender parity. And we produced a series of webinars, publications, education opportunities for women and to build more awareness of the incredible women we already have in our workforce. But again, right, if you go back to role models and seeing is believing, right, putting those women at the front lines of our podcast, our webinars, our education helps other women experience real world pathways for their own careers. And so, I'm super proud of the work that we've done over the last year to increase an awareness around gender parity. We've had some incredible companies stand up and say, yes, I'm for this as well, and continue to sponsor our work. We will continue our work in 2022 because, of course, we want to achieve gender parity over the next few years. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're very cognizant of the intersection of women. So that includes the intersection of race, the intersection of women early in their careers, the intersection of women who might be more advanced in their careers, and bringing a voice to them.
That's awesome. And I know that there's a best practices guide that people can find on the iMasons website under the I Am Women tab. And so there's ways for you guys to reach out and find out more of the series of events that are happening, including advocacy and, branding for yourself and, really being your whole self, and when you get to work, and just lots of great mentorship from some really amazing women. So I want to make sure our audience knows that there's the repository of information there and ways that you can reach out and, and really understand, what we're doing at iMasons and with I Am Women within that organization. I do have another question really quick, and then I'd love for you to give us some closing thoughts, Heather. So when it comes to firms, giving advice to firms about how to do better when it comes to any kind of diversity, but especially gender parity. I know you have some strong feelings about whether you have, whether it's a steering committee or whether it's, hiring specialty people or putting certain people in positions to be able to, bring about some awareness. And I would love for you to share those thoughts because I think they're very powerful. And I think it might help some of the listeners understand, maybe some more effective ways to tackle that.
I think it's a great question, Nancy. And before I start this, I want to preface it with, there's incredible work being done across a variety of different firms in our industry. And I want to honor and respect that work. But what I would like to encourage companies to think about is that DEI, in my opinion, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, in my opinion, isn't committee work. It's not a steerco. It's not a bolt-on. It needs to be intentional. It needs to be part of the core strategy of every company. And so to me, again, the work that's being done across a variety of different companies, I honor and respect it. And I've been engaged and involved in it myself. I believe it's incredibly important. But again, if that work is expected to be a bolt-on or committee level work, and that work falls on the shoulder of women to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, it means that their workload's just going up. And, 52% of the women, surveyed have already suggested that their workload during a pandemic is already increasing. So putting that burden on women is actually not as effective as ensuring that's part of your core everyday strategy. When we think about the benefits of diversity and inclusion and equity, we need to think about the benefits to an industry as a whole. And to me, one of the key benefits is not only, the economic incentive, but also innovation. And to me, innovation is what is critical in this industry for us to continue to expand at the rate that our demand continues to explode. And so how do you create an innovation culture? And how do you make sure that, all of the voices in the room are being respected? I think that has some real valid discussions that I think you and I can have, today around, gosh, what do you do in a culture to foster and empower innovation?
Yeah. Oh, and I love that topic. I love the innovation topic. And I mean, it seems obvious, but I guess it's not so much. But, having diversity of thought, does take, diversity of culture, diversity of gender, diversity of experience, and to be able to really, garner all of that talent and experience is so important to be more innovative. I always like to, tell folks, it's just a human thing, right? I mean, humans are limited. Our brains only know what we've been taught and what we've experienced. So if you've had very similar people thinking and at that decision-making level that have kind of experienced similar things throughout their lives, you're never going to be able to bring in the other diversity of thought that you really need. So but that also adds to that business case that we were talking about, which is very compelling. And I would encourage folks to look that up as well. So on a closing note, I would love for you to wrap this up for our younger listeners, because I really think that we do have a great platform of listeners who are looking up to, the executives in our industry. So for our younger listeners, what are your closing thoughts, Heather, on diversity and inclusion and basically gender parity in our business, and where it's headed, but also kind of like maybe the silver lining around that?
I think it's critically important for companies to remember that folks who are interviewing for roles in your organization should be interviewing what the culture looks like, and if the values that your new employees are expecting are actually available, if you will, in the company's, charter, in their mission, in their vision. And so, it's not just a paper exercise. You would expect that future employees are interviewing you just as much as you are interviewing them. And so, my signal, if you will, or my call to action for the next generation of workers is to really evaluate companies and the sense of purpose that they have. Do they meet those values that are important to you, whether it's flexibility, whether it's learning and development environments, whether it's career progression? Who are the role models? Can you see yourself succeeding in that company? I think that is something that I want everyone to take a little bit more control of in when they think about their careers, but also for organizations to remember that that's your commitment back to those future employees.
Outstanding. That's such good advice. So I really know our listeners are going to enjoy that. It's been so great, Heather. Every time we get together, I feel like we could just talk for hours. So thank you so much for joining Breaking Glass. And I look forward to talking again with the iMasons and I Am Women group.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Again, always a pleasure having a chance to chat. And I look forward to all of the work that we'll do together going forward.
Absolutely.